Just stay still. Seriously, don't pulse like that. Kalen squeezed his eyes shut, then forced them open again, hopping the flickering emergency lights were playing tricks on him. They weren't. The iridescent, quivering mass coating his left arm and spreading determinedly across the cockpit floor was definitely pulsing. It shimmered with oily rainbows, catching the dim light in ways that made his stomach churn. But beneath the surface, intricate patterns swirled like miniature galaxies, hypnotic and strangely beautiful. His hand, encased to the wrist, felt weird. Not cold, not hot, but vibrating with a low thrum like a tuning fork struck against the universe. He tried to pull back, a reflexive jerk, but the substance flowed with him, adhering seamlessly, its surface tension impossibly strong yet yielding. A faint, high-pitched chime echoed in his ears, or maybe inside his skull. Okay, he muttered, trying to keep the panic from tightening his throat. New plan. Don't talk to the sentient alien goo currently trying to absorb your arm. He fumbled for the emergency release lever of his crash couch with his free hand, the metal blessedly solid and non-pulsing. The impact alarm still blared intermittently, a counterpoint to the goo's internal chime. He'd clipped an uncharted asteroid fragment rookie mistake, fueled by exhaustion and desperation after dodging bounty hunters near Cygnus X1. His ship, the Rusty Bucket, was less flying and more falling gracefully onto this nameless jungle moonlet. The impact had thrown him forward, smashing a stasis canister stored improperly overhead. A canister labeled with warnings he hadn't bothered translating. And now this. The goo shifted again, a ripple moving through it like thought. A tendril thicker than the rest extended tentatively from the main mass on the floor, nudging his boot. Kalen flinched. Hey, personal space, all right. Pretty sure unsolicited bioassimilation violates several interstellar accords. The tendril paused, then retracted slightly, the colors within swirling faster, brighter. Was it listening, understanding? The thrumming in his encased hand intensified, sending jolts up his arm, not painful but deeply unsettling, like static electricity building before a lightning strike. He could feel microscopic vibrations, a sense of probing inquiry at the cellular level. Images flashed behind his eyes, not memories, but raw data, star charts he didn't recognize, complex molecular structures, flashes of intense, unfamiliar emotions, fear, desperate loneliness, overwhelming curiosity. It felt like his brain was being cross-referenced. He gritted his teeth, trying to focus. Escape pod, that was the priority. Forget the arm, forget the ship. Get out. He slammed the release lever. The harness popped open, but the goo surged, flowing up his chest in a warm, insistent wave, pinning him back against the seat. The colors shifted, deepening to violets and electric blues. The chiming intensified, becoming almost melodic. No, he gasped, struggling against the surprisingly strong pressure. Get off. What do you want? The goo flowed higher, reaching his neck. He could feel the thrumming against his pulse point. It wasn't constricting, not trying to choke him, but it held him fast. A section directly in front of his face seemed to thin, becoming almost transparent. 2 points within it coalesced darker, like nascent eyes forming in nebula dust. The chiming coalesced too, resolving into something that wasn't quite sound but resonated in his bones. A query, a greeting, a demand. Then a sharp, almost needle-like sensation pricked the skin of his palm deep within the goo's embrace. Panic flared, hot and sharp. Get the hell off me, he thrashed, putting all his strength into it, finally tearing his arm partially free. A strand of the iridescent substance snapped, releasing a shower of tiny, glowing particles like embers. Main mass recoiled, flowing back towards the floor, the colors dimming to bruised purples and grays. The nascent eyes faded. The chiming stuttered into discordant notes. Kalen scrambled out of the seat, his heart pounding, his breath ragged. His hand was free, tingling violently, skin red and strangely sensitive where the goo had pricked him. What the hell had that been? DNA extraction, viral injection. He stared at the now subdued puddle on the floor. It looked smaller, dimmer, almost forlorn. And Kalen felt an unexpected, unwelcome pang of something that wasn't quite pity but close. He'd heard it. An alien life form he didn't understand, probably scared and disoriented after the crash just like him. And he'd heard it. Great. First contact, Kalen style, panic yell inflict minor injury. Stellar. Kalen edged around the iridescent puddle, keeping his eyes locked on it. It remained huddled near the base of the shattered stasis canister, its glow faint, the internal patterns moving sluggishly. He needed to check the ship's diagnostics, assess the damage, see if the bucket was salvageable or if the escape pod was his only way off this humid, buzzing rock. But he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even though the nascent eyes hadn't reformed. The airlock controls were miraculously intact. He initiated the outer door cycle. Hopping the moonlet's atmosphere wasn't instantly corrosive or populated by things larger and toothier than his unwelcome passenger. A thick, cloying scent of damp vegetation and alien pollen flooded the cramped cockpit as the ramp lowered halfway before sputtering to a halt. Jungle sounds, a cacophony of clicks, chirps, and deep guttural calls pressed in. Lovely. Just bloody lovely. He turned back, grabbing his emergency pack, checking the charge on his pulse pistol. The goo shifted. It seemed to gather itself, flowing slowly, hesitantly towards the opening, towards the alien scents and sounds. It paused at the edge of the ramp, extending a single, shimmering pseudopod out into the humid air, testing. Kalen watched, fascinated despite himself. What was it? Where did it come from? Was it intelligent, dangerous? The way it reacted, recoiled when he yelled. It seemed less like a mindless blob and more like something aware. Something capable of being startled, maybe even hurt. The pseudopod touched the metal ramp, and the substance flowed onto it, its colors momentarily brightening, swirls of green and gold appearing as it seemed to analyze the new texture. It looked back towards him, or at least, the main mass oriented itself in his direction. The high-pitched chime resonated faintly again, inquisitive. "Yeah, I don't know either," Kalen muttered, slinging the pack over his shoulder. "Look, whatever you are, I didn't mean to freak out. Crash landings make me jumpy." The goo didn't respond, but it didn't retreat. It simply waited. Watching him, he sighed, talking to slime. His life had taken a weird turn. "Okay, here's the deal. My ship's busted. I need to see if I can fix it. If not, I'm taking the pod. You're native here. Can you survive out there?" Float a little further down the ramp, its form seeming to ripple, almost like a shrug. "Great help." "Right, okay. Well, try not to get eaten or stepped on." He moved towards the ramp, giving the goo a wide berth. As he passed, a thin tendril snaked out impossibly fast and brushed against his boot. He jumped back, pistol half raised. "Hey, boundaries!" The tendril retracted instantly. The colors flared briefly, a flash of bright, almost cheerful yellow, before settling back into muted tones. Was that amusement, apology? He couldn't tell. But the contact, brief as it was, sent another jolt up his leg, weaker this time, but still carrying that strange, inquiry-like resonance. And this time he felt something else, a flicker of his own recent memory mirrored back at him. The jolt of the asteroid impact, the blare of the alarm, his own surge of adrenaline and fear. It was like a brief psychic echo. The goo had felt his panic. It was reading him, that prick on his hand. It hadn't just taken something. It had established a link. The implication sent a fresh wave of unease through him. He needed off this moon, away from this thing, before it decided to do more than just read his surface thoughts. He stepped onto the ramp, his boots sinking slightly into the organic mush covering the ground outside. The jungle air was thick enough to chew. Giant, bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie blue glow on ferns the size of ground cars. He took a tentative step off the ramp, then another, his senses on high alert. Behind him he heard a soft, wet sliding sound. He glanced back. The goo was following him, flowing off the ramp and onto the jungle floor, leaving a faint, shimmering trail. It kept its distance, about 10 feet back, but it was definitely tracking him. "Oh, for crying out loud," Kalen groaned. "Can't I get 5 minutes alone?" The goo pulsed softly, its internal light swirling. It wasn't menacing. If anything, it looked curious, like a giant, iridescent, potentially psychic puppy made of sentient jello, a puppy that had somehow sampled his DNA. This was going to be a long day. The external damage was worse than Kalen had hoped. The portside landing strut was crumpled like cheap foil, and a nasty gash ran along the belly of the bucket, sparking intermittently. Definitely not flyable without extensive repairs he couldn't possibly manage here. Escape pod it was. He turned back towards the ship, planning to grab the emergency rations and water purifier, and found the goo blocking the ramp. It had spread out slightly, covering the entrance, its surface shimmering with agitated patterns of red and orange. The faint chiming had a sharper, warning edge to it. "Okay, what's your problem now?" Kalen asked, annoyed. "I need to get back inside." The goo didn't move. Instead, a thick pseudopod rose from its center, pointing insistently towards the dense jungle flanking the crash site. The chiming intensified, urgent now. "What? There's something out there." He strained his ears, listening past the regular thrum of alien insects. "Nothing, just the usual clicks and whistles. I don't hear anything." The pseudopod pulsed, pointing more vigorously. The colors swirled faster, agitated. Kalen frowned, gripping his pistol tighter. Maybe it sensed something he couldn't. Its senses were clearly different, operating on a level he didn't understand. That DNA sample, had it given the goo insight into potential threats? Or was it just jumpy? He took a cautious step towards the jungle edge, peering into the tangled undergrowth illuminated by the glowing fungi. Vines thick as his arms snaked between trees with bark like hammered copper. Everything dripped. He still didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary. "Look, whatever you are, Xyla," the name popped into his head unbidden. It felt right, resonant like the chiming. He mentally shook his head, nomming the goo. He was losing it. "Xyla," he said aloud, testing it. The goo seemed to react. The agitated colors softened slightly, shifting towards blues and greens. The chiming lost some of its sharpness. A ripple went through its mass. Did it like the name? "Okay, Xyla, if there's danger, fine, but I still need supplies from the ship." He gestured towards the ramp again. Xyla flowed aside slightly, clearing a path, but kept a portion of her mass near the jungle edge, turned outwards, vigilant. The colors remained alert, shifting patterns of deep blue and silver scanning the trees. Kalen hesitated, then quickly climbed back into the bucket. He grabbed the emergency kit, a hydro flask, and salvaged a handful of protein bars from a dented locker. As he worked, he felt that persistent, low-level hum in his mind, Xyla's presence, a faint awareness of her watchfulness outside. It wasn't intrusive, more like background static, but it was undeniably there. A connection he hadn't asked for and didn't know how to break. He slung the kit over his shoulder and headed back to the ramp. Xyla was still there, a silent, shimmering guardian. She flowed back slightly to let him pass, her form seeming different, less amorphous. While still clearly alien and fluid, the mass seemed to be gathering, defining itself more. There was a subtle suggestion of a central core, a hint of bilateral symmetry emerging from the ooze. Was it his imagination, or was she subtly starting to mimic a bipedal structure? Ridiculous. It was just goo. Sentient, psychic, possibly name-responsive goo, but still goo. "All right," he said, stepping back onto the damp ground. "Escape pod is plan A. It's on the dorsal side. We need to get around the hull." He pointed. Xyla flowed alongside him, maintaining her 10-foot buffer zone. As they moved, her form continued to shift. Tendrils occasionally elongated, testing the ground ahead or brushing against low-hanging foliage, retracting instantly if they encountered anything unexpected. The colors bled and swirled, reacting to the environment, greens and browns dominating near dense vegetation, blues and violets under the glow of the fungi. And sometimes, quick flashes of gold or yellow when her movements accidentally brought her closer to him. He tried to ignore the weird intimacy of it, the fact that this alien creature seemed attuned to his presence, maybe even his safety, after only a few hours and one unsolicited DNA sample. He was a loner, a scavenger who trusted no one. Attachments were liabilities, especially attachments to things that looked like spilled paint from a cosmic art project. They reached the escape pod hatch on the ship's topside without incident, though Kalen felt Xyla's silent, watchful presence the entire time, a low hum beneath the jungle's noise. The hatch mechanism was manual, thankfully, but stiff from the impact. Kalen braced himself and heaved on the release wheel. It groaned, resisted, then finally gave with a screech of tortured metal. The hatch popped open a few inches. He wedged his fingers in, straining to pull it wider. "Almost there," he grunted, muscles burning. "Just need to." A section of Xyla detached from her main body, flowed up the hull like quicksilver, and wedged itself into the gap beside his fingers. It was warm, smooth, and pulsed with that familiar thrum. Before he could react, it expanded rapidly, forcing the heavy hatch fully open with surprising strength. It held the hatch there, its surface shimmering under the alien moonlight filtering through the canopy. Kalen stared first at the open hatch, then at the pseudopod holding it. Thanks." The pseudopod gave a little wiggle, or maybe it was a pulse, before retracting smoothly back into Xyla's main form, which had flowed up the hull to wait beside the hatch. Her colors were a soft, swirling mix of blues and silver, the chiming almost imperceptible. He shook his head, a reluctant smile twitching his lips. Okay, maybe sentient goo wasn't entirely useless. He peered inside the pod. Cramped but functional. Emergency beacon, limited nav controls, enough life support for a few days. Enough to get him to a trade route or a nearby system. Enough to get away. He turned back to Xyla. She had settled near the hatch, her form still subtly shifting, consolidating. The suggestion of symmetry was stronger now, a vague approximation of a torso and perhaps limbs coalescing within the fluid mass. The head area was still indistinct, but those two darker points, the nascent eyes, flickered faintly within the glow. "Right," Kalen said awkwardly. "This is it, my ride out. You gonna be okay here?" Xyla flowed closer, stopping just inches from his boots. A tendril reached out, not fast this time, but slow, deliberate. It stopped just short of touching his hand. The chiming in his head intensified slightly, carrying a complex mix of curiosity, uncertainty, and something else, a question. A plea. He remembered the flashes of emotion he'd felt earlier, the fear, the loneliness. Was she asking to come with him? He recoiled mentally. No, absolutely not. He couldn't take an unknown, potentially dangerous alien entity onto an escape pod, drawing who knew what kind of attention. Besides, where would she even fit? "Look," he said, trying to sound firm. "I can't take you. The pod's barely big enough for one. You belong here, right? This is your world." Xyla didn't respond verbally, but her colors dimmed, shifting to muted grays and deep violets. The nascent eyes faded completely. The tendril retracted slowly. The feeling of loneliness washed over him again, stronger this time, sharp and poignant. It wasn't just her feeling, it was resonating within him, amplified by their strange connection. He felt a pang of guilt so sharp it surprised him. He owed her, didn't he? She'd potentially warned him of danger, helped him open the hatch. And she seemed lost, alone, just like him in a way. Damn it. He scrubbed a hand over his face. What was he thinking? He couldn't get attached. He couldn't be responsible for her. Maybe, he started, then stopped. What could he even offer? Suddenly, a high-pitched whine split the air, followed by the crackle of energy discharge impacting the bucket's hull nearby. Sparks flew. Kalen instinctively dropped, pulling his pistol. Ambush, Xyla reacted instantly. Her form surged, expanding rapidly, flowing over the escape pod hatch like a living shield. Her colors flared violently, jagged streaks of crimson and black shot through with electric white. The chiming became a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the deck plating. Another energy bolt hit the hull, closer this time. Figures emerged from the dense jungle shadows, humanoid, clad in dark, functional armor, carrying heavy pulse rifles. Bounty hunters. They must have tracked his FTL trail. "Target acquired," one of them barked, voice tinny through a helmet speaker. "Male human, standard retrieval fee. What the criff is that?" They'd spotted Xyla. Guns swiveled towards her. "Engage the anomaly," the lead hunter commanded. Pulse bolts slammed into Xyla's form. Instead of piercing, the energy seemed to disperse across her surface, causing violent, incandescent ripples but no apparent damage. She absorbed the blasts, her glow intensifying, the growling resonance deepening in Kalen's skull. She was protecting the pod, protecting him. Adrenaline surged through Kalen. He wasn't leaving her. Not now. "Cover me," he yelled, though he wasn't sure if she understood language or just intent. He rolled away from the pod, firing quick bursts from his pistol towards the hunters, forcing them to take cover behind the giant fungal stalks. Return fire stitched across the hull near his head. He ducked back. Xyla flowed, extending a thick pseudopod that slammed into the ground near one of the hunters with surprising force, throwing up dirt and phosphorescent mulch. The hunter scrambled back, startled. She wasn't just shielding, she was fighting back. Kalen used the distraction, firing again, scoring a hit on one hunter's shoulder plating, sending him staggering. But there were at least 4 of them spreading out, trying to flank their position. They were pinned down. "Any bright ideas, Slimeball?" Kalen shouted over the intermittent weapons fire. Xyla's form pulsed. A section near him seemed to thin, and he felt that familiar mental probe, stronger this time, not just reading surface thoughts but digging deeper, searching. Flashes of his ship's schematics, his knowledge of its systems, his own desperate desire to escape, all mirrored back at him, analyzed, processed. Then a new resonance filled his mind, not a question but a suggestion. An image. The bucket's main reactor core, overloaded, unstable, dangerous, suicidal, but maybe distracting enough. "You want to blow the reactor?" Kalen breathed, horrified and weirdly impressed. "That's insane, we're right next to it." The suggestion persisted, accompanied by a feeling of calm certainty, and another image, Xyla enveloping him, shielding him within her mass. Could she do that, survive a reactor breach? He didn't have time to debate. Another pulse bolt vaporized a chunk of metal near the hatch. "Fine, crazy plan, let's do it." He scrambled towards a damaged maintenance panel near the crumpled landing strut, his destination somehow already clear in his mind, guided by Xyla's projected intent. She flowed with him, keeping her main body between him and the hunter's line of fire, absorbing several more hits that sent dazzling, painful-looking flares across her surface. She extended thin tendrils, interfacing with the damaged panel Kalen was struggling to open, bypassing fried circuits with her own bioconductive form. Lights flickered on the panel, access granted. Kalen frantically keyed in the reactor overload sequence, override codes he barely remembered, pulled from the depths of his memory by Xyla's probing. Alarms shrieked inside the crippled ship, louder and more insistent than the crash warnings. "Warning, reactor core integrity critical, detonation imminent." 30 seconds, Kalen yelled, scrambling back towards the escape pod. "Xyla, come on." The hunters paused, their helmeted heads turning towards the escalating alarms from the ship. "What is he doing?" "Fall back, that ship's gonna blow." They started retreating, firing parting shots as they melted back into the jungle. Kalen reached the pod, turning to usher Xyla inside. But she wasn't flowing towards safety. She was flowing towards the unstable reactor section, her form concentrating, becoming denser, brighter. The chiming in his head was intense, focused. He felt her intent clearly: containment. She was going to try and smother the blast, or at least redirect it. "Xyla, no, get in the pod," he screamed, horrified. She paused, orienting towards him. The nascent eyes reappeared, clearer now, burning with an intense blue light within her shimmering form. He felt a wave of complex emotion wash over him. Determination, affection, a strange, fierce protectiveness, and underlying it all, that deep loneliness now tinged with purpose. A single tendril reached out, fast as thought, and brushed his cheek. It was warm, impossibly soft, and conveyed a universe of feeling in that fleeting contact. "Go. Live." Then she turned back to the ship, surging towards the groaning, overheating reactor compartment just as a blinding white light erupted from within. Kalen threw himself into the escape pod, slamming the hatch override just as the shockwave hit. The escape pod bucked violently, thrown clear of the moonlit surface by the force of the bucket's exploding reactor. Kalen was slammed back into the pilot's seat, the internal dampeners barely coping. Through the small viewport, he saw the incandescent bloom of the explosion engulfing the crash site, momentarily turning the alien jungle into a landscape of fire and shadow. There was no sign of Xyla, just wreckage and expanding plasma. Guilt and a raw, unexpected grief clenched Kalen's chest. She'd saved him. She deliberately stayed behind, sacrificing herself to contain the blast, to give him time to escape. The crazy, beautiful, baffling slime creature had saved his life. He gripped the controls, his knuckles white. Why would she do that for him? A stranger who'd yelled at her, planned to abandon her, that brush against his cheek, "Go. Live." It echoed in his mind, saturated with an emotion too profound for him to fully grasp. Was it driven by instinct? By the connection forged through his DNA? Or was it choice? He engaged the pod's thrusters, angling away from the moonlit, setting a course for the nearest registered safe zone, a derelict orbital station several hours away at sublight speed. The pod shuddered as it hit the upper atmosphere. He felt numb, hollow. The silence in the small cabin was absolute, a stark contrast to the constant, low-level psychic hum he'd unknowingly grown accustomed to. Zyla's presence was gone. He was alone again. Just the way he always thought he wanted it. It felt empty, worse than empty. He ran a hand over his face, his fingers brushing the spot on his cheek where she'd touched him. The skin still tingled faintly. He closed his eyes, seeing the swirl of her colors, feeling the warmth of her presence, hearing the strange chiming resonance in his memory. He'd never understand her. Maybe no human could, but he wouldn't forget her. Hours passed in the cramped silence of the pod. Kalen drifted in and out of an uneasy sleep, haunted by images of swirling light and sacrifice. He woke with a start, his heart pounding. Something felt different. The background hum. It was back, faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there, like a distant radio signal slowly gaining strength. He sat bolt upright, scanning the tiny cabin. Nothing, just him and the cold metal walls. Was he imagining it? Grief playing tricks on his mind. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger, resolving into that familiar, inquisitive chime. It wasn't just in his head this time, it seemed to emanate from his pack. The emergency kit he'd grabbed from the bucket. He cautiously unzipped it. Inside, nestled amongst the med patches and protein bars, was a small, pulsating blob of iridescent goo, no bigger than his fist. It glowed faintly with soft blues and silvers. As the light from the cabin hit it, the nascent eyes flickered open, focusing on him. A wave of relief, tentative and questioning, washed through the psychic link. Kalen stared, dumbfounded. A piece of her, had a fragment survived, or had she somehow transferred a part of her consciousness, her essence, into this small piece before the end? "Zyla," he whispered, his voice hoarse. The blob pulsed gently. The chiming strengthened, filled with recognition and something akin to weary satisfaction. It flowed slightly, nudging against a ration bar wrapper. Kalen let out a shaky laugh, relief flooding him so intensely it made him dizzy. You crazy, unbelievable piece of alien jello, she wasn't gone. Not entirely. She was here, with him. Reduced, weakened, but here. He carefully lifted the small blob out. It felt warm, familiar, vibrating faintly in his palm. The connection flared, a two-way street now, less like static and more like a conversation whispered below the level of conscious thought. He felt her exhaustion, the immense energy she'd expended, but also her stubborn will to survive, her focus on him. He gently placed her on the console beside him. The blob slowly relaxed, its glow softening as it seemed to rest, conserving energy. But the connection remained, a steady, comforting presence in the sterile confines of the pod. He wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to be. The derelict station was still hours away. He had time. Time to figure out what this meant. Time to understand what she needed. Time to protect this small, miraculous piece of her, whatever it took. The derelict orbital station, Whisper Base, drifted in the black, scarred and silent. Kalen guided the escape pod into a crumbling docking bay, the magnetic clamps engaging with a rusty groan. Life support was minimal, gravity plating intermittent, perfect for laying low. He powered down the pod, the sudden silence amplifying the low, steady hum emanating from the blob of Zyla resting on the console. It had remained quiescent during the final approach, conserving energy, but the psychic connection felt stronger, more stable. He carefully scooped her up. The substance flowed readily into his cupped hands, warmer now, the internal colors swirling with more vibrancy than before. She pulsed gently, a soft chime resonating against his palms. "All right," he murmured. "Let's find somewhere slightly less likely to vent us into space." He slung his pack, now doubling as Zyla's temporary transport, over his shoulder, and cycled the pod's inner airlock. The station air was thin, cold, tasting of recycled oxygen and decay. Emergency lights flickered weakly along deserted corridors littered with debris. Ideal. Using the station blueprints downloaded from a public data node before he left the bucket's wreckage vicinity, Kalen navigated the decaying hallways towards the old biolabs. If anywhere had the containment gear or nutrient solutions Zyla might need to recover, it would be there. As he walked, he felt her stir within the pack, her curiosity piqued by the new environment. Faint impressions reached him, metallic tangs, residual energy signatures, the echoes of past occupants. Her senses were incredibly acute, even in this diminished state. Inside a relatively intact lab, amidst shattered sample vials and dormant diagnostic screens, he found a large, clean environmental chamber designed for cultivating extremophiles. Power conduits nearby still showed a trickle of energy. He managed to reroute auxiliary power, bringing the chamber humming to life, its internal atmosphere regulators kicking in. "Best I can do for now," he told the blob he gently placed inside the sterile chamber. "It's temperature-controlled, filtered air. Might be more comfortable than my dirty backpack." Zyla flowed out of his hand onto the smooth floor of the chamber, spreading slightly, her colors brightening. She pulsed her nascent eyes at him, a wave of something like gratitude flowing through their link. He found a container of sterile nutrient gel, universal protein base, long expired by human standards, but maybe compatible with her unique biology. He placed a small amount inside the chamber. Zyla extended a tentative pseudopod, touched the gel, and seemed to analyze it. After a moment, she flowed over it, absorbing it slowly. Good. She needed energy. While she ate, Kalen explored the rest of the lab, scavenging for useful tech. He found a functional portable scanner, some basic repair tools, and a data chip containing fragmented research notes from the station's last occupants. He plugged the chip into his wrist comp, hopping for clues about the station's history, maybe even something about Zyla's species, though that felt like a long shot. Most of the data was corrupted, but one file fragment flickered to life. Project Chimera log excerpt. Specimen Ax 7 exhibiting unexpected morphic resonance post-DNA integration. Subject: human, involuntarily acquired. Form stabilization exceeding projections. Mimicry protocols initiating. The log cut off. Kalen stared at the screen, his blood running cold. Specimen Ax 7, morphic resonance, DNA integration, mimicry. Zyla wasn't just some alien life form, she was an experiment, Ax 7. And the DNA she'd integrated, it was his. That prick on his hand wasn't just a sample, it was the catalyst. He looked back at the chamber. Zyla had finished absorbing the gel and was now changing. Her form, previously a simple blob, was elongating, thickening, rising from the floor. The suggestions of bilateral symmetry were becoming explicit. Two main lower appendages flowed into existence, supporting a rising torso-like structure. Two more appendages branched from the upper torso. A distinct head shape formed atop a nascent neck. Her entire structure was still fluid, still shimmering with internal light, but the shape, it was unmistakably, terrifyingly humanoid. She turned towards him, the nascent eyes solidifying into luminous blue orbs that regarded him with unnerving familiarity. She raised one of her upper appendages, flexing shimmering, fluid fingers. The chime resonated, no longer just in his head, but softly audible in the lab. It sounded questioning, expectant, and maybe triumphant. She wasn't just a piece of goo anymore. Thanks to his DNA, Zyla was taking shape. His shape. Kalen leaned against the lab bench, stunned, watching Zyla explore her new form within the environmental chamber. She moved with a fluid grace that was utterly alien, yet the underlying structure was becoming disconcertingly human. The limbs flowed and reshaped subtly with each movement, not constrained by rigid bone, but the intent of the form was clear. She stretched, twisted, touched the chamber walls, seemingly fascinated by the capabilities of this new configuration. Her surface still shimmered, but the colors were less chaotic, coalescing into defined patterns, swirling blues and silvers across the main body, accents of gold around the hands and feet, and those intense blue eyes that tracked his every move. The psychic connection hummed, broadcasting her curiosity, her pleasure in the newfound articulation, and a constant, underlying awareness of him. It was intimate and invasive all at once. Project Chimera, Kalen muttered, running the fragmented log through his mind again. Morphic resonance mimicry protocols. Someone had made her or her species, engineered them to absorb DNA and adapt. To what end? Infiltration, espionage, or something else entirely. And who were they? More importantly, were they still looking for specimen Act 7? He felt a surge of possessive anger. Zyla wasn't a specimen. She wasn't a tool. She'd saved his life. Whatever her origins, she was her own being. And now she was his responsibility. A responsibility taking on a shape that was both alien and disturbingly familiar. Zyla approached the transparent wall of the chamber, placing a fluid hand against it directly opposite where Kalen stood. Her blue eyes held his gaze. The chime in the air softened, becoming inquisitive, tentative. This form good. The thought wasn't in words, but pure conceptual feeling transmitted across their link. Kalen swallowed, his throat dry. Good, it was. Alarming, intriguing, confusing as hell. It's surprising, he managed, stepping closer to the chamber. Definitely more structured than before. He reached out, mirroring her gesture, placing his hand on the barrier opposite hers. Even through the transparent material, he could almost feel the warmth, the thrumming energy of her. Her fluid fingers shifted, aligning perfectly with his own through the barrier. A jolt, like biofeedback, shot up his arm. He felt her fascination with the solidness of his form, the resistance of bone and flesh, so different from her own fluid state. And mirrored back, he felt her own internal landscape, the constant flow, the shifting connections, the way she perceived the world through vibrations, energy fields, and now through the lens of his own genetic blueprint. She tilted her head, a remarkably human gesture performed with inhuman grace. You feel this form. I don't know, he admitted. It's weird. Seeing you look like this. Like a blueprint of him rendered in living light and fluid dynamics. A ghost image, not like she corrected the thought sharp and clear, is becoming, not just mimicking, integrating, using his DNA as a template to stabilize, to evolve into a more complex state. The implications were staggering. What else had she absorbed? Memories, traits, feelings. Her blue eyes seemed to hold an echo of his own guarded nature, his sarcasm, his hidden loneliness. It was like looking into a bizarre, beautiful, terrifying mirror. He snatched his hand back from the barrier as if burned. Okay, we need to figure out what this means. Who made you? Why are they hunting you? Zyla's form drooped slightly, the colors dimming. The feeling of past fear, the echo of containment and experimentation from the fragmented log flowed from her. Hunters, others, want control, absorb. She didn't want to be controlled. She didn't want to just absorb, she wanted connection. That was clear from the way she focused on him, the way their link felt. Just then his wrist comp pinged. An alert he'd set before leaving the pod, proximity sensors triggered by incoming ship signatures. Damn it, he swore, checking the readout. 2 ships, small scout-class, non-standard transponders vectoring towards Whisper Base. Too fast to be casual scavengers. They knew he was here. Or more likely, they knew she was here. They were being hunted already. He looked at Zyla, her new form radiating nervous energy, colors shifting rapidly. They found us. Okay, new plan, Kalen said, his mind racing. Staying here is suicide. Those aren't bounty hunters looking for me, they're professionals, probably the Chimera Project people coming for their specimen. He grabbed his pack and pistol, his eyes darting between the tactical display on his wrist comp and Zyla. Her humanoid form rippled with anxiety, the blue eyes wide, fixed on him. Danger, close. Yeah, I see that. Question is, can you move fast like this? Can you fight? He needed her help, not just as a shield this time, but as a partner. Zyla straightened, her fluid form seeming to gain density, definition. The swirling patterns on her surface resolved into sharper, almost crystalline structures. Can fight. The certainty in that thought was chilling. She flowed towards the chamber door, pressing against it. Kalen quickly keyed the release. She emerged into the lab, taller than he'd realized, easily matching his height. Her movements were silent, unnervingly graceful. She looked less like an imitation of humanity and more like an evolution, something sleek and dangerous. Right. Station Command Center is our best bet, Kalen decided, pulling up the schematic. Central hub, multiple escape routes, maybe access to defense systems if anything still works. He pointed down the corridor. This way. Stay low, stay quiet. They moved through the derelict station's corridors, a strange pair, the grizzled human scavenger and the glowing, fluid alien taking his shape. Kalen kept his pistol ready, scanning intersections. listening for any sound over the station's groans and the soft chiming that seemed to follow Zyla like an aura. She moved beside him, her senses extending far beyond his own. He felt flickers through their link, the scuttling of station vermin in the walls, the faint energy signatures of the approaching ships, the cold emptiness of the void outside. She anticipated corners, flowing low or pressing flat against bulkheads instinctively, her form adapting seamlessly to the environment. They reached a junction. Kalen peered around the corner, empty. He signaled Zyla forward, but she held back, her form tensing. Wait, he froze. A moment later, the distinct clatter of armored boots echoed from further down the corridor they'd been about to enter. Heavy footsteps, methodical, searching. Kalen ducked back, heart pounding. They were close. Zyla pressed herself against the bulkhead, her colors darkening, blending almost perfectly with the shadowed metal. Only her luminous eyes remained bright, fixed on the corridor entrance. Kalen held his breath. Two figures in sleek black environmental suits, carrying sophisticated scanner arrays and energy rifles, appeared at the junction. They moved with military precision, sweeping the corridor. No biologicals detected this level, one reported into their helmet comm. Act 7's energy signature is faint, fluctuating, could be shielded. Or damaged, the other replied curtly. Command wants it contained, not destroyed. Keep scanning. They moved past the junction, heading deeper into the station, away from Kalen and Zyla's hiding spot. Kalen let out a slow breath. Too close. He looked at Zyla. Her mimicry wasn't just physical. She'd instinctively known how to hide, how to suppress her energy signature enough to fool their scanners temporarily. That DNA integration went deep. Command center, he whispered, pointing in the opposite direction. Quickly. They hurried through the maze of corridors, the sense of urgency palpable. Zyla flowed effortlessly, her new form proving remarkably agile. Kalen found himself relying on her subtle warnings through their link, avoiding potential dead ends or structural weaknesses she sensed ahead. They reached the command center, a large circular room dominated by a holographic display table, thankfully still drawing power. Most consoles were dark, but a few flickered with emergency status readouts. Kalen went straight for the main console, trying to access external comms or defense systems. Locked out. Heavy encryption. Figures, he muttered. Zyla moved to the holographic table. She placed her fluid hands on its surface. The table flickered violently, then stabilized, displaying a detailed schematic of Whisper Base, overlaid with two blinking red icons representing the hunter ships docked at the bay Kalen had used. Energy pulses emanated from Zyla's hands, interfacing directly with the station's network. Accessing her thought echoed, laced with intense concentration. Systems damaged, fragmented. Consoles around the room sparked to life erratically. Lights flickered. On the schematic, Kalen saw internal security doors activating, sealing off sections of the station. She was fighting back, using the station itself. Can you lock them out? Buy us some time. Trying, network resistant, old protocols fighting. Suddenly, the main blast doors to the command center slammed shut with a deafening clang. Red alert lights began flashing. On the schematic, multiple life signs appeared, converging on their position. The hunters had realized where they were heading. They're boxing us in, Kalen yelled. Zyla pulled her hands back from the hollow table, her form rippling, shedding the calmer blues and silvers for battle-ready crimsons and blacks again. Her eyes burned fiercely. Fight here. She turned to face the main doors, her fluid arms elongating, sharpening into blade-like edges that shimmered with contained energy. She wasn't asking. She was ready. Kalen gripped his pistol, planting his feet beside her, trapped, outnumbered. With an alien creature borrowing his DNA, and apparently ready to turn a derelict command center into a kill zone. Just another Tuesday. The heavy blast doors shuddered under a powerful impact. Metal groaned, sparks showered from the reinforced seams. The hunters weren't bothering with finesse anymore. Kalen raised his pistol, sighting on the door. Beside him, Zyla stood poised, her blade-like arms humming faintly, her entire form radiating contained power. Her blue eyes were narrowed, focused. He felt her battle readiness through the link, cold, sharp, utterly determined. They break through. I engage. You flank. The tactical thought was startlingly clear. integrating his presence, his limited capabilities into her plan. She knew he couldn't match their technology or her power, but she intended to use him anyway. He nodded grimly. Got it. Another tremendous blow hit the door, buckling it inwards. A third impact and the locking mechanism shattered. With a screech of tearing metal, the heavy doors were forced apart, revealing 3 black-suited figures framed in the opening, rifles already raised. Zyla moved before they could fire. She launched herself forward, not running but flowing, covering the distance in a terrifying liquid surge. Her bladed arms lashed out, faster than Kalen could track. One hunter fired wildly, the energy bolt splashing harmlessly off Zyla's shifting form as she twisted past it. Her blade sliced through his rifle, then through the armored suit at the shoulder joint with horrifying ease. He screamed, collapsing. Kalen opened fire, aiming for the other 2, forcing them to split their attention. His shots sparked off their advanced armor, doing little damage but buying Zyla precious seconds. She spun, engaging the second hunter. Her movements were mesmerizing, a deadly dance of fluid grace and lethal precision. She parried rifle blasts with one arm, the energy dispersing across her shimmering surface, while the other arm darted like a serpent's strike, finding gaps in the armor, disabling joints, severing power conduits. The second hunter crumpled, suit systems failing. The third hunter, clearly the leader, backed away slowly, firing controlled bursts, trying to keep Zyla at bay. Specimen Act 7, the leader barked, voice strained. Cease hostilities, return to containment protocol. Zyla paused, her head tilted. The chiming resonated, laced with something that felt like cold amusement. Containment. She lunged again. The leader sidestepped, bringing up a different weapon, a containment field projector. A shimmering blue field erupted between them, crackling with energy. Zyla slammed into it. The field held, throwing her back, her form flickering violently as the energy disrupted her cohesion. She landed heavily, her shape momentarily losing definition, becoming more amorphous. Zyla, Kalen shouted, firing at the leader, trying to draw his attention. The leader ignored him, focusing the containment beam on Zyla, trying to solidify the field around her. Kalen saw Zyla struggling, her colors shifting chaotically, her connection with him flickering with pain and disorientation. He had to do something. He remembered the console, Zyla's attempt to control the station systems. Maybe he scrambled to the nearest active console, the one Zyla had first touched. It displayed environmental controls for this sector. Ignoring the flashing warnings, he slammed his fist onto the emergency purge command for the fire suppression system. With a loud hiss, thick, coolant fog began flooding the command center from ceiling vents, obscuring visibility instantly. What? The hunter leader exclaimed, momentarily blinded, his containment beam wavering. It was the chance Zyla needed. Kalen felt her gather herself, drawing on some deep reserve. Her form solidified rapidly back into the bladed humanoid shape, but now it pulsed with an intense, almost blinding white light. She exploded upwards, shattering the weakened containment field with sheer force. Before the leader could react in the swirling fog, she was on him. Kalen heard a sickening crunch of armor, a choked gasp, and then silence. The fog slowly began to dissipate, revealing Zyla standing over the fallen leader, her blade arms dripping slightly, her internal light slowly softening back to blues and silvers. The immediate threat was over. Kalen sagged against the console, adrenaline leaving him shaky. He looked at Zyla, truly looked at her. The grace, the power, the lethal efficiency, and the chilling familiarity of the form she wore. His form. She turned to him, her blue eyes meeting his. The intensity faded, replaced by concern. "You safe?" he nodded, pushing himself upright. "Yeah, thanks to you again." He gestured at the fallen hunters. "Your creators, part of them." A feeling of vast, cold bureaucracy reached him, a project, not the ultimate source. They will send more. Probably, Kalen agreed wearily. "We need to get out of here properly this time." He looked around the damaged command center. Escape was still the priority, but escape where and what then? He looked back at Zyla. She had flowed closer, her shape softening slightly, losing some of the hard, weaponized edges. She reached out a fluid hand, stopping just short of touching him. The loneliness he'd felt from her before was still there, but it was different now, tempered by their shared experience, their forced reliance, their strange, undeniable bond. It wasn't just her loneliness anymore. It resonated with his own. He met her gaze, the shimmering blue depths that seemed to hold reflections of his own soul. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cool, smooth surface. The connection flared, warm, intimate, full of unspoken understanding. He wasn't just her template, her protector by circumstance. And she wasn't just an alien experiment he was stuck with. They were something else, something new. "Okay," he said softly, his hand closing gently around hers. Her fluid fingers flowed, reshaping, fitting against his palm perfectly. "Let's find a ship." Finding a functional ship on Whisper Base felt like a long shot, but Zyla's connection to the station's fragmented network proved invaluable. Guided by her senses and the flickering schematics she could access, they navigated the least damaged sectors, avoiding patrols Kalen suspected were automated station security reactivated by the fight, or perhaps more hunter teams searching methodically. Zyla seemed to anticipate threats, guiding them through service tunnels and maintenance shafts Kalen would never have found. Her humanoid form moved with silent efficiency, but Kalen noticed the toll the fight and the sustained network interface had taken. Her glow was slightly dimmer, the colors less vibrant, and the psychic hum connecting them carried an undercurrent of fatigue. He felt a protective urge flare up, sharp and surprising. He found himself scanning their path more carefully, taking point more often, trying to shield her from unnecessary exertion. They finally reached a secondary hangar bay, smaller than the one he'd arrived in, containing a single, dust-covered courier vessel. It was old, scarred, but the diagnostic scan Kalen ran showed core systems were green. Reactor online, life support functional, engines probably needed coaxing. "Looks like our ticket," Kalen said, relief washing over him. He started the pre-flight sequence, bypassing security lockouts with tools scavenged from the lab. Zyla flowed around the cramped cockpit, touching consoles, her senses analyzing the ship's systems more deeply than his scanner could. Functional. Needs energy stabilization. She placed her hands on the main power conduit access panel. A soft blue light flowed from her into the ship's systems. Lights steadied, engine hum smoothed out, power readings on the console climbed to optimal levels. She was essentially jump-starting the old ship with her own energy. "Hey, take it easy," Kalen protested, seeing her glow dim further. "Don't drain yourself. Necessary for us." She looked at him, her blue eyes serious. The simple statement hung in the air, heavy with implication, us. Kalen finished the pre-flight checks, his hands moving automatically while his mind grappled with the reality of their situation. They'd escaped the hunters for now. They had a ship, but they were fugitives. Kalen was already running from bounty hunters over old debts. Now he had the added complication of harboring, aiding, and being inextricably linked to an escaped experimental alien life form wanted by a shadowy organization. His life had officially gone from complicated to downright insane. He strapped himself into the pilot's seat. Zyla settled into the co-pilot chair, her fluid form adapting easily to its contours. She looked, right there, natural, as if the seat had been waiting for her. He powered up the main engines. They whined, sputtered, then caught with a satisfying roar. "Hangar doors," he muttered, scanning the controls. Zyla simply placed a hand on the console, and with a groan of ancient mechanisms, the huge bay doors began to retract, revealing the stardusted blackness outside. "Show off," Kalen grumbled, but there was no heat in it. He eased the courier out of the bay, clearing the decaying station. He plotted a jump course, somewhere remote, uncharted, somewhere they could disappear for a while. As the ship accelerated towards jump point, silence settled in the cockpit again. Kalen glanced at Zyla. She was looking out at the stars, her reflection shimmering on the transparent steel viewport. Her form seemed more relaxed now, the colors soft, swirling gently. "So," he started, breaking the quiet. "What now?" She turned her gaze from the stars to him. The connection between them pulsed, warm and deep. Together, it wasn't a question or a demand. It was a statement of fact, acknowledgement of the bond forged in chaos, solidified by shared danger and the strange intimacy of their linked existence. His DNA, her morphic potential, their combined will to survive, to be free. Kalen looked at her, this incredible, impossible creature who wore a semblance of his face, who had fought for him, saved him, linked herself to him in ways he still didn't comprehend. The fear, the suspicion, the ingrained loner instinct, they were still there, lurking in the background. But stronger now was a sense of wonder, fierce loyalty, and a burgeoning affection that felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. He reached across the console, his hand hovering near hers. She met him halfway, her fluid fingers intertwining with his solid ones. The contact was electric, sending a cascade of shared sensation and emotion through their link, her weariness mingling with his relief, her quiet strength bolstering his resolve, their separate lonelinesses dissolving into a shared solitude. It wasn't just physical contact. It felt like circuits completing, souls touching. He saw their future stretching out, uncertain, dangerous, probably chaotic. More running, more hiding, maybe more fighting, but not alone, never alone again. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, a silent promise. The ship surged forward, stars elongating, distorting as the hyperdrive engaged, hurtling them into the unknown together.